Midnight Moon. Written by Suzana Thompson. Narrated by Sarah Sampino. Chapter 28. People don't know what it's like to truly be in tune with nature, to be fully immersed in the sights, sounds, and scents of it. I am alive with the wonder of it all, as the wilderness calls to me with an exhilarating feast of the senses. I breathe in sharp, cold air that carries an intoxicating mix of natural scents. My ears distinguish sounds that would be undetectable to humans. I also see my surroundings in the dark in much clearer detail than a human would. The part of me that belongs to the wild absorbs the moonlit night with an awareness that exceeds anything a human is capable of. That heightened awareness is now a permanent part of me, and I have only vague memories of what it was like to experience the world with limited human senses. My wolf dreams have become reality, as Damien and I roam free as wild creatures that communicate in primal ways that our human minds can understand, despite the lack of familiar speech. We trek silently through the pristine snow together on my first night as a wolf. Pain pulled me up from that vivid dream, and I opened my eyes to moonlight spilling through the bedroom window. Damien was instantly by my side, and I stroked his fur. "It's okay," I told him, and moved my hand to my belly. "Everything's okay." I had almost dozed off again when another bout of pain brought me fully awake again. This time I stayed alert after it passed. My due date was more than 2 weeks away, and we had been relieved that we didn't have to worry about it coinciding with the full moon. However, after timing my contractions and calling the doctor, I was told that I would need to go to the hospital once they started coming in 5-minute intervals. Damien stood tensely listening to my telephone conversation, and he whined in frustration after I hung up. "This is only the start of labor," I reassured him. "We've probably got a long time until she's born." He began to restlessly move around the room in his agitation. He'd refused to leave me alone after I became pregnant, even during the full moon. I knew how confining it must be for him to stay inside during the change, but he stayed by my side. He couldn't really help me in his current state, though. "I'm going to call Charlene," I said. Damien responded with a short bark. "I have to," I insisted. "I need someone to drive me to the hospital." Charlene and Nick had become our closest friends, and I knew that I could rely on them to help me. The tricky part would be coming up with a reasonable excuse for Damien's absence. "Ice fishing!" Charlene exclaimed in outrage. "My due date isn't for 16 more days," I reminded her. "We just didn't think that it would happen so soon." "He still shouldn't have gone," she grumbled. "I'm sorry to have to bother you," I apologized. "It's no bother," she assured me. "How far between are your contractions?" 6 minutes, I replied. "We'll be right there," she said. I got dressed and closed the bedroom door behind me, leaving Damien hidden in our room. He would have to wait there until dawn, but we had no other choice. This was one time when being a werewolf was very inconvenient, although we could usually plan our lives around it. "How are you feeling?" Nick asked anxiously when they arrived. "The contractions are getting stronger, but I'm fine," I answered. "I'll call the doctor and let him know we're leaving for the hospital." "Where's your overnight bag?" Charlene questioned. I had planned to pack one as my due date neared, but I hadn't gotten around to it yet. "I'll be fine without one," I told her. "I'll do it real quick while you call the doctor," Charlene said. To my dismay, she quickly moved toward the bedroom in our small apartment. My protest of a loudly exclaimed no came too late, for she had already opened the door. She shrieked, apparently having seen the large black wolf within. She left the door open in her panic as she ran back to us. "A wolf! In there! A wolf!" "It's okay," I soothed. "He won't hurt you." Nick hurried to look and stopped short in the doorway. "That's..." I tried to make my way to the bedroom, but was halted by another contraction. Damien trotted past Nick and came to me. He whined in sympathy for my pain. Turning toward Nick, He then went to paw at the door to the apartment before returning to Nick and nudging his leg with his snout. "We're leaving in a minute," I told him. Nick's eyes snapped from the wolf to me.
"It's yours?"
"You have a wolf?" a shell-shocked Charlene asked. "He's not dangerous," I said.
"It's the same wolf,"
Nick stated in amazement. "Your wolf?" Charlene questioned in shock. Damien gave an impatient bark and nudged my leg. "Okay," I agreed. "We're going." I led the way toward the door, and my stunned friends followed. Charlene had completely forgotten about the overnight bag, and I was anxious to get them out of the apartment without having to answer further questions about the wolf. Just as we reached their car, I saw the lights appear in the sky. They were bright on this crisp, clear winter night. We watched them for that brief time before they disappeared. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard when Nick started the car and saw that it was 11, but the appearance of the northern lights had already told me that it was magnetic midnight. It was the scientific explanation of what made that spectacular sight visible to us. All I could think about, though, was that my life was about to change in the most amazing way yet. My wedding day had been the happiest day of my life so far, but I anticipated that the birth of my daughter would surpass it. I just hoped that Damien would be able to be there for it too. "That wolf," Charlene began.
"Not now,"
Nick interrupted her in a quiet tone.
"We'll talk about it after the baby's born."
Fortunately, it was a short drive to the hospital. Nick stayed with us until I checked in, and then he told Charlene to call him when the baby was about to be born. He said that he had an upset stomach and needed to go home. "Keep trying Damien on his phone," Charlene said.
"Okay,"
he agreed and took off. "I bet he's going to take a nap," she confided. "He looked more exhausted than I did after Tommy was born." "Where is Tommy?" I suddenly worried. "My mother's watching him," she explained. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the doctor. My labor progressed slowly but steadily over the course of the night. Damien arrived shortly after dawn and relieved Charlene from maternal duty by my side. "Nick finally got a hold of you?" she questioned.
"He's in the waiting room,"
Damien replied.
"Thank you for staying with Clarissa."
"Come out and let us know after the baby's born," she requested.
"I will,"
he promised. Our daughter was born 2 hours later. We gave her the name we had chosen after finding out that we were having a girl. Cora was a healthy 8 pounds, and Damien and I gazed at each other in wonder after we saw her. Charlene exclaimed how precious the baby was, but Nick was more subdued as he congratulated us. I would later discover that he was still reeling from the confirmation of his suspicions about the wolf in our apartment. He'd been the last one out, and he'd left the door unlocked, already planning his return after he drove me to the hospital. Nick vividly remembered the wolf that saved him from the bear in the wilderness, and he was sure this was the same one. His thoughts returned to the strangely protective behavior of the wolf that watched over him, and how Damien came upon him right after he awoke to find the wolf gone. He now came to an unbelievable conclusion in his mind. He wondered if it was any more unbelievable than finding that same friendly wolf in our apartment, the same apartment where Damien happened to live. It was still there when he opened the door and stepped inside. Nick grabbed a beer out of our refrigerator and sat down on our couch to regard the wolf standing in front of him. It waited silently while he drank the beer.
"Charlene's gonna call me when Clarissa's about to have the baby,"
Nick said. The wolf sat down on the floor after Nick spoke. Time passed, during which he contemplated the extreme weirdness of the situation. He got up a couple times to go to the bathroom, and he called Damien several times and hung up when he was directed to voicemail. Nick continued to think his impossible thoughts until the wolf growled at him. It paced to the door and got back to Nick, clearly wanting him to leave. Nick got up and walked to the window. He saw that the darkness had faded to a soft gray. Dawn was coming, and bringing the answer to the question that had secretly been plaguing his mind all night.
"I'm not leaving, Damien."
There. He had spoken it aloud, but he didn't turn to look at the wolf. He heard it stop pacing before it wandered away into the bedroom. Nick watched the sunrise, and he continued to stand at the window until he heard slow footsteps approaching behind him. Damien was there when he turned around. The two men regarded each other warily. Nick pulled himself away from his chaotic thoughts.
"What are you waiting for?"
he demanded.
"Your baby's being born."
They drove separately to the hospital, and they didn't speak as they rode the elevator to the maternity ward. Damien related his version of Nick's reaction to me the next day after we took Cora home. Charlene came to visit, but Nick stayed away. Of course, he had work and other responsibilities, but he had always found time to socialize with Damien before. "Give it time," I advised Damien. "It took Jeremy a while to be okay with it, but he's fine with it now." Daphne had completely given up hope on Jeremy when she called him to tell him about a vision she'd had. She told him the details and hung up without saying anything personal. There was no real urgency to this one, since the kid was already dead, but she'd needed to tell someone. She didn't know why she suddenly knew where to find the boy's body and who had killed him, since she'd gotten nothing back when his desperate mother had shown her son's picture to Daphne after her psychic abilities made the news. Jeremy called Daphne 3 days later. He told her that the man she'd identified as the murderer was being paroled after serving time for an unrelated crime. Jeremy actually had a few days off, but he decided to follow the man. The guy abducted a kid walking home from school the very day he was set free from prison. Jeremy called for help, and his fellow police officers were able to get the kid back safely and arrest the man. They obtained a search warrant and found evidence of his past crimes in the personal belongings he'd stored at his mother's house while he was in prison.
"You saved that boy from ending up like the others he killed,"
Jeremy said. "But that woman found out her son is dead," Daphne told him. "At least she had hope before."
"You stopped that from happening to another mother,"
he insisted.
"And now that woman can finally put her son to rest."
"Okay," she said. "I'll let you know if I have any more visions."
"Wait,"
he pleaded before she could hang up.
"Could I come over? I need to talk to you."
"Sure," she agreed morosely, almost telling him to just say it over the phone. She expected him to officially break up with her after nearly a year of keeping her waiting for his response to her werewolf situation. Instead, he stunned her by apologizing and telling her that he missed her every day, before getting down on one knee and proposing to her. Daphne was ecstatic for all of 30 seconds before becoming furious with him. "No!" His expression changed from excited anticipation to deep disappointment.
"No?"
"No!" she repeated angrily. "You can't leave me hanging for a year without a word and then expect me to jump back into your arms."
"Yes,"
he said sadly as he rose to stand.
"I blew it. You've moved on and—"
"I might," she interrupted him, "might be willing to try going on a date with you if you ask me out." Hope came alive in his eyes.
"Will you go out with me, Daphne?"
"Be more specific," she ordered. "You haven't told me where we're going." He tried to suppress a grin. "I mean where we might be going," she amended. He named her favorite restaurant and formally asked her to dine with him there at 7 next Friday evening. Things moved quickly after that, even though she tried to hold back, and they were engaged 6 months later. Damien and I attended their wedding, and they later came to Alaska for ours. Although they got married before us, they were holding off on having kids until Daphne got established in her career. She was the first person I called after my family upon Cora's birth. I was now better friends with Daphne than Taylor. We just simply had more in common and spoke more frequently. I now believed that Daphne's dream had been a premonition, and that we would all share magnetic midnight together with our kids one day.